Forget everything you're doing. Right now, put down your phone, close your tabs, turn off the noise. Because I'm not here to talk about the latest political circus. No talking points from cable news. No left versus right shouting matches. I'm going to show you something most people have trained themselves not to see. And once it clicks, once you truly grasp what's unfolding, you'll never look at the Middle East the same way again. Here's the pattern. Every single time Washington has launched a war in that region, they sold you the same lie. It'll be fast, it'll be clean, it'll be worth it. Iraq 2003, Libya 2011, Syria, every time the same script. And every single time the war went off the rails. Every single time the aftermath was worse than the disease. Now we're standing on the edge of something that makes all of those conflicts look like dress rehearsals. A direct American military confrontation with Iran. And I'm going to tell you exactly why that war, if it starts, will not stay small. It will not stay contained. It will spiral in ways that will shake every corner of the globe. Let me rewind to the beginning. Because you can't understand where we are unless you understand how we got here. This story didn't start last year. It didn't start with the last administration. It started in 1953, Part 1, The Original Sin. In 1953, the CIA and British intelligence orchestrated a coup. They overthrew Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. His crime? He wanted to nationalize Iranian oil. He wanted his country's resources to benefit his own people, not Western corporations. That was unacceptable. So they removed him. They reinstated the Shah, a loyal puppet, and for the next 26 years, Iran was essentially a U.S. client state. Then came 1979, the Iranian Revolution. The people rose up, threw out the Shah, expelled American influence, and established an Islamic Republic. And from that exact moment, the relationship between the United States and Iran became a continuous low-boil war. Not always a shooting war, but always a war. Sanctions, covert ops, proxy battles, assassinations of Iranian nuclear scientists, cyber attacks on their facilities. For over 45 years, it's been a Cold War. And what we're looking at now is that Cold War turning dangerously, catastrophically hot. My framework, how to see clearly. Before I go further, let me explain how I think about this, because I don't want you to just trust me. I want you to test my logic yourself. I use three lenses. First, structural reality, the unchangeable facts, geography, population, economics, military assets, the things that don't care about your opinions. Second, real incentives, not what politicians say in press conferences, not the propaganda. What do the key players actually want when you follow the money, the power, and the survival instinct? Third, historical patterns. History doesn't repeat exactly, but human nature does. Empires make the same mistakes over and over because they're too arrogant to learn from the past. Now let's apply those lenses to the question, what actually happens if America attacks Iran? Part 2, Iran is not Iraq. Let me state this as bluntly as possible. Iran is not Iraq. Say that 10 times until it sinks in, because Western media and politicians keep acting like this is just Iraq 2.0. It is not. Iraq in 2003 was already a corpse. 12 years of crippling sanctions had gutted its economy. Its military had been bombed into rubble during the first Gulf War. Saddam Hussein had alienated half his own population and most of his officer corps. The country fell in 3 weeks because it was already broken before the first American tank crossed the border. Iran is a different animal entirely. Population, 90 million people. Iraq had 25 million in 2003. Size, 4 times larger than Iraq. Mountainous, diverse terrain. A nightmare for an invading army. Military preparation. Iran has spent 25 years preparing specifically for a U.S. ground invasion. Not 25 months, 25 years. They've built underground bases inside mountains, so deep that satellites can't fully map them. They've dispersed weapons production across hundreds of tiny workshops hidden in basements and warehouses. You can't bomb what you can't find. Drone technology. They've mastered cheap, mass-produced drones designed for asymmetric warfare. swarms that overwhelm expensive defense systems, fighting doctrine. They don't plan to line up in open deserts and trade fire with American tanks. They plan to fight like guerrillas, the way every empire in history has eventually lost in this region. And here's the part that Western analysts consistently miss: nationalism. The Iranian regime is authoritarian. Yes. Many Iranians have real grievances against their own government. Yes. But Iranians are also one of the most fiercely patriotic peoples on earth. They have 2,500 years of continuous civilization. They remember Cyrus the Great. They remember the Persian Empire. And when a foreign army crosses their border, something predictable happens. Internal divisions collapse. The population unifies. Suddenly, American soldiers aren't fighting a regime. They're fighting a nation. This happened in 1980 when Saddam Hussein invaded. He thought revolutionary chaos had made Iran weak. Instead, Iran mobilized. The war lasted 8 years. 1 million people died, and Iran never surrendered. Let that sink in. 8 years, 1 million dead, and they did not surrender. That is the enemy Washington is contemplating. Part 3. What each player actually wants. Let's talk incentives. Forget the official statements. What's the real game? What America wants. America says it wants to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. It says it wants peace and stability. But let's be honest, the real driver is control over global oil, and more specifically, the petrodollar system. Since 1973, nearly all oil has been priced and traded in US dollars. That means every country on earth needs dollars to buy oil. That creates permanent global demand for the dollar. That demand allows the United States to run massive deficits, print trillions of dollars, and not collapse like any other country would. The petrodollar is the financial engine of the American empire. And the petrodollar depends on U.S. control over the Middle East. That's why America has maintained military bases across the Gulf for decades. That's why we've fought war after war there. Not because Americans are evil. Most Americans genuinely believe they're fighting for freedom. But the structural reality is this is a war for the economic survival of the American empire. Iran sits on the Strait of Hormuz, the choke point through which 20% of the world's oil passes. That makes Iran the single greatest threat to the entire system. What Iran wants: first and foremost, survival. I'm not being dramatic. That's literally true. Iran watched what happened to countries that gave up their weapons programs. Muammar Gaddafi in Libya surrendered his nuclear ambitions in 2003, cooperated with the West, opened his country to business. 8 years later, NATO bombed Libya, and Gaddafi was dragged out of a drainage pipe and killed. Saddam Hussein had no weapons of mass destruction in 2003. America invaded anyway, and he was hanged. Iran learned the lesson. The only real security guarantee is the ability to defend yourself. So they've been building that ability, not just nuclear latency, but missiles, drones, and a network of proxy forces across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. They've constructed a defensive architecture specifically designed to make an American attack as painful as possible. Beyond survival, Iran wants regional legitimacy. It wants an end to crushing sanctions. It wants the Strait of Hormuz as permanent leverage, and it wants its allied network protected, what Israel wants. Israel isn't just defending itself, it's auditioning for a larger role. The current Israeli leadership envisions Israel as the dominant military and intelligence power in the Middle East, especially as American power inevitably declines. They're showing the world that they have the will, the unity, and the capability to project force, that they can be the reliable muscle of the global system when the U.S. can no longer afford to be. This is a high-stakes bet, and it requires America to fight a war that serves Israeli strategic interests far more than it serves the interests of ordinary American citizens. Part 4, the spiral, how this war explodes. This is the part most people never think about. When analysts talk about a war with Iran, They imagine a two-player game, America versus Iran. That's dangerously wrong. This war is embedded in an entire regional and global architecture. And when the shooting starts, every connection starts to vibrate. Let me walk you through the cascade. Day 1, the Red Sea closes. Within hours of a major U.S. strike on Iran, the Houthis in Yemen will dramatically escalate their attacks on shipping in the Red Sea. They've already demonstrated they can do this. Under wartime conditions, with full Iranian support, they can effectively close the Red Sea to commercial shipping. The Red Sea carries 12–15% of global trade. European economies depend on it. Asian manufacturing depends on it. The disruption to supply chains would be immediate and catastrophic. Simultaneously, Hezbollah opens a second front. Hezbollah is the most capable non-state military force on the planet. They fought Israel to a standstill in 2006 and have spent 18 years rearming with far more sophisticated weapons. They have over 150,000 rockets and missiles aimed at Israel, many of them precision-guided. Israel's Iron Dome can handle a certain volume. It cannot handle everything. In a full-scale war, some of those missiles will get through. Israeli cities will take hits. Infrastructure will be damaged. The political pressure inside Israel will be immense. Within days, Iraq ignites Iranian-backed militias in Iraq, which collectively make up a significant portion of the country's armed forces, will begin attacking U.S. military bases. There are still American troops in Iraq. In wartime, they become targets. America then faces a brutal choice: withdraw from Iraq entirely or escalate further by striking Iranian-backed forces inside Iraq, which brings the U.S. into direct conflict with the Iraqi state itself. Iraq's government, heavily influenced by Iran, will be under enormous pressure to demand American withdrawal. If the U.S. refuses, you have a second major front in a country where America thought the war was long over. The Strait of Hormuz, the choke point Iran has invested massively in its ability to threaten the strait. Anti-ship missiles along the coast, fast attack boats designed for swarm tactics, naval mines, ballistic missiles aimed at U.S. aircraft carriers. Can Iran close the strait permanently? Probably not. America has the naval power to reopen it eventually, but it doesn't need to be permanently closed to cause catastrophic damage. Even a 20–30% disruption in oil flows will send prices to $150–200 per barrel. At $200 oil, every economy on Earth goes into recession. Food prices spike because fertilizer is made from petroleum. Transport costs explode. Manufacturing grinds. Ordinary people in America, Europe, Asia, and Africa will feel this war in their wallets, at the grocery store, at the gas pump, every single day. The global dimension, China and Russia. This is not a world where America can act unilaterally without consequences from the major powers. China imports about 10 million barrels of oil per day. A significant portion comes through the Persian Gulf. Any disruption to Gulf oil flows is a direct attack on the Chinese economy. Beijing has been very clear. It will not accept a restructuring of the Middle East that cuts off its energy supply. Russia has deep ties to Iran and has been systematically working to undermine American power for years. They may not intervene militarily in Iran directly, but they will accelerate every other pressure point. More weapons to groups fighting U.S. interests. More diplomatic isolation of America in international forums. More pressure on the dollar through energy deals in non-dollar currencies. America won't just be fighting Iran. It will be fighting in an environment where Russia and China are actively working to ensure it loses. The nuclear question. Iran is already at the threshold of nuclear capability. U.S. and Israeli intelligence both assess that Iran could produce enough enriched uranium for a weapon in a matter of weeks. They've deliberately held back for geopolitical reasons. But if America launches a full-scale attack, if the Iranian regime genuinely believes its survival is at stake, what's the rational calculation? Every strategic actor would conclude that nuclear deterrence is the only thing that can stop further escalation. I'm not saying Iran would use a nuclear weapon. The nuclear taboo has held for 80 years. But the pressure to acquire a deterrent would become overwhelming. And here's where it gets truly dangerous. If Iran moves toward a bomb under these circumstances, Saudi Arabia will immediately seek one. They've already said so publicly. They have the money and the relationships to move fast. If Saudi Arabia goes nuclear, Turkey has to consider it. And if Turkey considers it, every calculation in NATO becomes infinitely more complicated. One regional war in the Middle East could trigger the most serious global nuclear proliferation crisis since the Cold War. Part 5. The cost exchange problem. I know what some of you are thinking, but America is the most powerful military in history. Surely our firepower can overwhelm all of this. I want to address this directly because it's the most dangerous misconception driving American strategy. In terms of air power, naval power, precision strike, yes, America is dominant, no question. But here's the hard lesson of military history. You cannot win a war from the air alone. We bombed North Vietnam with more tonnage than was dropped in all of World War II. Vietnam did not surrender. The US and Britain bombed Germany continuously for years. Germany did not surrender from bombing. It surrendered when Soviet and American soldiers were physically inside Berlin. Air power can degrade. It can destroy infrastructure. It can kill leaders, but it cannot break the political will of a determined population. And if air power alone can't achieve regime change in Iran, then the question becomes, do you send in ground troops? A ground invasion of Iran is where the spiral becomes truly catastrophic. The arithmetic of asymmetric war. Here's a number that should keep every Pentagon strategist awake at night. Iran fires a drone that costs between $20,000 and $50,000. America fires an interceptor missile to shoot it down. That interceptor costs between $3 million and $10 million. Iran fires these drones in swarms, hundreds at a time, thousands over the course of a campaign. For every dollar Iran spends on offense, America spends $60 to $200 on defense. And America's stockpiles of interceptors are not unlimited. Production of these sophisticated missiles takes years. The U.S. defense industrial base, hollowed out by decades of financialization and cost-cutting, cannot rapidly replace these stocks. This isn't speculation. U.S. military commanders have already been warning Congress about interceptor shortages. The most powerful military in human history is vulnerable to a cost exchange problem that a much smaller, much poorer country has deliberately engineered. That's not luck. That's strategic genius on Iran's part. Part 6, the home front. What happens to America? Now let's talk about the political and economic reality inside the United States. Right now, a significant percentage of the American public does not support a war with Iran. That number will not go up as the war drags on. It will go down because every week of war brings more pain. Gas prices rising every week. Grocery bills rising every week. Interest rates climbing as the Federal Reserve fights war-induced inflation. Young Americans coming home in flag-draped coffins. And the question that will echo louder and louder is the same one that echoed during Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. What are we fighting for? What does winning even look like? How do we know when it's over? No president, not this one, not any future one, will be able to answer those questions satisfactorily, because the structural reality is that there is no clean military solution to Iran. There is no moment where Iran simply surrenders and accepts American dominance. Without a clear definition of victory, every additional day of war is just more cost, more pain, more political erosion with no end in sight. Part 7, the long term, what this war does to American power. This is the most important part, and the one that gets the least attention. America's global power rests on two pillars. Military power, yes, but more fundamentally, financial power. The dollar as the world's reserve currency. That gives the U.S. extraordinary privileges. It can borrow money cheaply. It can run trade deficits indefinitely. It can impose sanctions that actually hurt because other countries need dollars to function. All of this is connected to the petrodollar system. And the petrodollar depends on Middle Eastern oil states being willing to price their oil in dollars and keep their dollar reserves in American banks. Now imagine a long, messy, losing war in the Middle East. What does that show every oil-producing country in the world? It shows them that American military protection is not reliable, that America cannot guarantee stability, that betting on the dollar is a losing bet in the long run. Saudi Arabia is already having conversations with China about pricing some oil sales in yuan. Russia and China are already building alternative payment systems designed to route around the dollar. A visible American military failure in the Middle East would accelerate this shift dramatically. And when the petrodollar weakens, America's ability to fund its military weakens. And when its military weakens, its ability to enforce the petrodollar weakens further. That's a spiral that once started is very hard to stop. Part 8, a lesson from 2,500 years ago. Let me leave you with a historical parallel, because sometimes the past illuminates the present with painful clarity. In 415 BC, Athens was the most powerful city-state in the Greek world, the most advanced navy, the most sophisticated democracy, the most vibrant economy. And Athens decided to launch an expedition to conquer Sicily, a distant island, to extend its empire and demonstrate its power. The general Nicias warned against it. He said the cost would be enormous. The enemy would be resilient. Athens was overextending itself dangerously. They didn't listen. They launched the expedition. It ended in catastrophic failure. Tens of thousands of Athenian soldiers died. The navy was destroyed. And the city that had been the envy of the Greek world never recovered. America today is Athens. Iran is not Sicily, but the warning is the same. Empires that cannot learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And the price is always paid by the young men and women sent to fight and the ordinary citizens who bear the economic pain. Closing, I'm not telling you all of this to despair. I'm telling you because the first step to avoiding a catastrophe is seeing it clearly. And right now, most people are not seeing clearly. They're watching cable news. They're scrolling past headlines. They're assuming that the people in charge know what they're doing. They don't. The same mistakes are being made, the same arrogance, the same refusal to learn from history. And the stakes this time are higher than they've been in decades. Iran is not Iraq. This war will not stay small. It will not stay contained. It will spiral through the Red Sea, through Lebanon, through Iraq, through the Strait of Hormuz, through global oil prices, through nuclear proliferation, through the very foundation of American financial power. And once that spiral starts, no one knows how to stop it. So pay attention, ask hard questions, demand better from your leaders, because the alternative is waking up one morning to a world that looks fundamentally different and wondering how we got here. We got here by ignoring the warnings. We got here by believing the same lies we've been told a dozen times before. And we don't have to do it again. But that choice is ours. And the window is closing.